What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? D-backs lock up their closer of the future in Justin Martinez. And are we getting close to the final D-backs opening day roster?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist, and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we were discussing D-backs getting close to unveiling their final roster. We'll discuss the rotation. It seems like it's going to be rearranged going into the regular season. We'll discuss that. Then Justin Martinez got extended by the D-backs. Looking at the numbers, looking at the stats, and what it means for Arizona's future. So a whole bunch to discuss with you guys on today's podcast. First, I want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss the D-backs closing in on their final roster because they've been making some roster moves on Sunday, and it feels like we know who the Kevin Newman role is going to be, the backup catcher role, and how the bullpen is also going to be laid out. We still don't have the official naming of the closer yet. Sounds like that won't be named until around opening day. We know who the opening day starter is going to be in Zach Gallen, but still a little bit up in the air who the closer might be, and we'll discuss J Mart later in the podcast. But for the rest of the roster, I think we're starting to know who is winning those spring battles, because you look at that Kevin Newman super utility role. It's been a big competition, and it really the last week and a half has come down to Garrett Hampson versus Ymardo Vargas. Those two guys have been crushing it in spring training, and offensively, Vargas has edged Garrett Hampson, and you can't really even say it's close. I mean, Vargas has had a fantastic spring training. Hampson has been really good too, but Vargas has a 375 average and a 1059 OPS going into Sunday's games. Like, he's been incredible. Only had 4 strikeouts to the 10 RBIs, like good plate discipline, not striking out a ton, showing some pop, getting like clutch hits. Like, he's done really everything you could want from a guy fighting for a role in spring training. Like, he's been incredible. But when you think about the D-backs, their identity, their philosophy, we have been preaching chaos baseball the last few seasons as we have ascended and become good. Our philosophy has been chaos, right? That has been our brand. Sacrifice hits, creating havoc on the bases, speed, taking extra bases, putting pressure on the defense. That has been D-backs baseball. Meanwhile, also playing incredible defense, right? Limiting those runs. Outfield defensively has been incredible. Christian Walker, Perdomo, Ketel Marte last year. D-backs defense, creating havoc on the bases. That has been the D-backs identity and the philosophy for at least the last 2 to 3 seasons. I think Garrett Hampson just fits that mold better than Vargas. And he's also had a great spring training as well. But when you think about the skill set of a Garrett Hampson, you think of 2 things. The first thing you think of is speed. This has been one of the fastest players in baseball the last few seasons. You go on sprint speed on StatCast, he's going to be up there, one of the league leaders. You look at his numbers back what he was doing in Colorado. I mean, he has 135 steals over the last 7 seasons. And so, or did I say that right? 130. What number did I just say? That's not correct. He has 64 steals over the last 7 seasons. He has 135 walks. I was looking at the wrong category in Baseball Reference. He has 64 steals over the last 7 seasons. But you go back to 2021 and 147 games, he had 17 steals. Like, he does have the ability to swipe a bag Plus, he plays really good defense as a guy that could play all over the infield, shortstop, second base, can also play in the outfield. The fact that he has that defensive versatility, which we know the D-backs absolutely love, mixed in with the skill set of speed that can help play into the chaos and the havoc on the bases that Arizona loves to do. Garrett Hampson just fits the mold and the identity better than Vargas, despite him also having an even better spring training. You can make the argument for Garrett Hampson just fits the D-backs mold a little bit better. So like to see him. He's the guy that we projected and we want to win all offseason. So glad to see Garrett Hampson win the job. Now let's talk about the D-backs bullpen, because it seems like the D-backs have made up their mind. We finally got word on who is going to the D-backs bullpen, who is going to the D-backs rotation. And I got to say, I'm a little bit surprised by who is going to the bullpen. We know Jordan Montgomery was going to be there. He couldn't be optioned to AAA. We know with that contract, he was forced to be on the major league level. So not a surprise at all to hear the D-backs announce Monty to the bullpen. But the other guy that I was surprised by is Ryan Nelson. He goes back to the bullpen as the D-backs long reliever. And yes, he's coming off a fantastic season where he was arguably the best D-back starter in 2024. But the reason why I thought he wasn't going to make the D-backs bullpen is because there's just been so much discussion, it seems, around keeping Ryan Nelson as a starter, continue to develop him as a starter. I know it's a lot of conversation on D-backs Twitter. I know a lot of D-backs fans wanted Ryan Nelson to go to the minor leagues because they want to develop him as a starter. A lot of people feel like putting him in the bullpen is actually going to mess up his development, mess up his long-term future. If you do want to put him in the rotation with Gallen, Kelly, and Monty coming off the books at the end of this season, if you wanted to put Ryan Nelson in the rotation for next year, people want to see Ryan Nelson then start this season in AAA, continue to get those reps and opportunities as an everyday starter. But the D-backs decided, we're going to go the other way. Ryan Nelson was so good for the D-backs last year, and we saw how quickly things can change in terms of your health. So why not already have him on the major league level going against the best competition in baseball? Because there is another world. We go to AAA, and because we know Reno is such a hitter-friendly ballpark, that whole league just really caters to the offense. If he goes down there and has like a 5.6 ERA because of the ballpark and how it's set up, could that hurt the confidence and the development of a Ryan Nelson? I'm not sure. I'm not mad at all for the D-backs putting him in the bullpen. I was not one of those people saying he had to go to AAA to continue his development as a starter. Personally, long-term, I still view Ryan Nelson probably as a mid to high leverage reliever coming out the pen, just throwing hard, being a flamethrower. Yes, he still has potential and still has upside as a mid to back end starter. But personally, I view Ryan Nelson more as a reliever, long-term flamethrower out the pen. So I'm not upset to see the D-backs put him in the bullpen because I still think he can still be super helpful in that role. He was really good for Arizona last season when he was in the bullpen as well. And so I'm not mad at all for the D-backs putting Ryan Nelson in the bullpen. I think that's a fine position for him. Yes, there are going to be people upset because they want to see him develop as a starter, but he was so good for Arizona last year. I still, at the end of the day, I feel like we're at least, you can make the argument, it's an award for Ryan Nelson. You're awarding him a roster spot on the major league level, coming off a fantastic season last year. I think even Ryan Nelson would prefer to pitch on the big league level, then go back to the minors. So you could quibble about what it means for his long-term development, but for the right now, I think it probably is the best decision for the D-backs. If you're talking about winning right now, he probably is the best option for the D-backs bullpen. But that doesn't mean he's always going to be in the D-backs pen. There could be injuries throughout this season. And so there can always be ways for Ryan Nelson to get back in the rotation at some point this year for the D-backs, and especially at some point next year with some guys coming off the books. And so if you are upset with Ryan Nelson going to the pen, don't worry. We will see Ryan Nelson back in the rotation at some point in the near future. Now I want to discuss the rotation rearrange and Corbin Burnes not going against the Chicago Cubs. We'll discuss that in segment number 2. And also, I want to talk to you guys about Just Ingredients because when it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. That's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients has also partnered with two-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. I love that Just Ingredients prioritizes wholesome, nourishing ingredients without the artificial junk. Just visit justingredients.us/Bryce Harper and use code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off your first order. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram. Welcome back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And there's one more roster battle I want to discuss before getting to the D-backs rotation being rearranged, because the backup catcher battle also looks like it has been decided, with Adrian Del Castillo being optioned back to AAA, which makes sense. It's something we've discussed a ton on the podcast because, of course, Jose Herrera is out of options. So basically, you're going to say goodbye to Jose and make ADC your full-time backup catcher. I think for the D-backs, we all love ADC. They love ADC. They want him, I think, as a long-term piece, at least for his bat, or at least as a trade chip because of his bat that could be flipped for something else down the line. Like, the D-backs like ADC, whether it's as a development, as a position player, for catcher, just an offensive piece in the building and the lineup, like they like that, or as a trade chip that another team wants, so you could flip for something else of need on your roster. Like, D-backs are in on ADC. They see him as a legitimate player in Major League Baseball who should have a long career, and so they are not going to rush him. They are not afraid to send him to the minors because it's like right now, ADC, he's a great talent, great offensive player, but he has massive flaws in his game when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. And the D-backs right now need a solid backup defensive catcher. Yes, ADC's bat is amazing, but we saw him last year with Gabriel Moreno out. ADC would go out there and he would crush at the plate, but there would also be times he would give up some runs or at least put the other team in good scoring position because he just could not stop any base runners on the pass, right? And so for the D-backs, they value that. They care about defense so much. And it's like you have the team with the best offense from last year, right? Yes, you lost Christian Walker. Yes, you lost Jock Peterson, but you're not going to go from the best offense to like the 18th best offense, right? This is still going to be one of the best offenses in baseball next year. And so it's like D-backs are like, we don't need another great offensive player who's just going to be on our bench. If we're going to go to the bench, let's make sure we got a guy that could play some defense, be a sub, and actually spell for Gabriel Moreno in a positive way in terms of limiting runners, limiting bases, stuff like that, throwing out guys. Adrian Del Castillo still needs to work on that part of his game. And so I understand what the D-backs are doing here. From a compliment side to Moreno, Jose Herrera makes more sense from the defensive perspective. Offensively, ADC has Jose, but defensively, D-backs care about that more. For a backup position as well, they're probably going to value the defense a little bit more. And the fact, again, he's out of options just led to the fact that Jose Herrera was going to win this backup job. But like I've been saying on this podcast, I do believe, like we saw recently, Pavin Smith left the game with a wrist contusion, the same one that he got surgery on a couple years ago. Seems like it's going to be fine. But as I've been saying, if there's an injury to Pavin Smith, or if he really struggles, because he is just going to be primarily lefty platoon DH. If he struggles in that role, gets hurt, I could see Adrian Del Castillo getting the call up to be the lefty batter for the D-backs. Why not? We saw him last year be a really effective offensive player. It's the defense that he struggles with, but we know how good his bat is. I mean, 25 games, 313 average, 893 OPS, 4 home runs, 19 ribbies. Like, he was incredible coming up for Arizona. And so we all love ADC. We definitely think he'll make an impact at some point on this roster. this year. But for now, start the year in AAA, get that back going, get those everyday opportunities, work on your defense. And then once your defense gets to a level where it's at least fundamentally average, then that's when you're really going to see ADC's game open up and get real opportunities on the major league level. So just continue to work on your defense if you're Adrian Del Castillo. Now let's discuss the rotation being rearranged for the D-backs because, of course, Zach Gallen was named the D-backs opening day starter, which means Corbin Burnes at best was going to be the number 2 starter in the series against the Chicago Cubs. But Corbin Burnes is a very methodical guy, very routine-based guy, coming off a bad outing against the Milwaukee Brewers. He told Torey, I'm not done this spring training. I want to go out there and I want to continue to pitch and continue to work on my game. And so Corbin Burnes now is getting pushed out the Chicago Cubs series, and he won't pitch until the New York Yankees series. And I got to say, I'm not upset at all with this situation. For one, Zach Gallen deserves the respect of an ace. It's fine with him going in the game number 1. I have no quibble about that. He's projected to go game 1. And Merrill Kelly projected to go game number 2. And then I believe, let me pull it up real quick. Game number 3 is expected to be Brandon Pfaadt against the Chicago Cubs with Erod going on Sunday. And so Corbin Burnes will face the New York Yankees on April 1st. But I don't mind that for going against the Chicago Cubs because I'm not here to disrespect the Cubs, but I would much rather Corbin Burnes go against the team coming off the World Series, who I think is a little bit better. Let's save him for the second series against one of the biggest markets. And also, Corbin Burnes is coming from the AL East. He faced the Yankees a ton last season for the Baltimore Orioles. I like him starting off the series against the Yankees. New York is going to be like, oh my God, I thought this guy left the division. I thought we weren't going to have to see him again. Now you have to see him immediately to begin the year on April 1st. And then the rotation resets with Gallen and Kelly after that. You get your 3 best starters now going in that series against the New York Yankees. And so I do not mind at all the rotation be rearranged. Corbin Burnes, we're not going to see him at all the opening series. He will pitch the second series against the New York Yankees. That does not upset me. He's coming from the AL East. I like that familiarity he already has against New York. Put him back in a situation where he could really be a strength to Arizona. And then also, something I've discussed on the podcast in the offseason, I think it would be kind of interesting and potentially beneficial if the D-backs really experimented with their rotation and maybe you put Zach Gallen or Corbin Burnes as your number 4 starter for at least the regular season, because I would just love to see a rotation where someone puts like their best starter more in the middle to break up the back end of your rotation. Because I think so many times a lot of teams feel good about their 1, 2, and 3, but that 4 or 5 could be a little bit more hit or miss. And instead of having 2 guys back to back who might be volatile, you could do like a Gallen, a Kelly. You could go Erod and then go Burnes and then Pfaadt, because now if you put Burnes in the middle of Erod and Pfaadt probably feel like the D-backs 2 most volatile pitchers, right? Both of them can pitch like potential all-stars, but Erod is also a guy who we see coming off a season where he had a big ERA. Brandon Pfaadt's a guy who we know can look good through 3-4 innings and then have a blow-up inning. So if that's the case, you don't want to risk back-to-back bad starts, right? Put an elite pitcher in between as your number 4 starter. Go Erod, Corbin Burnes, Brandon Pfaadt. I think it could be something very fun to experiment with in the regular season that potentially could produce better results for you in the regular season as well. Now, once we get to the postseason, it's all about reverse pyramid, stacking your talent at the top of your rotation because you want to see your number 1 starter as many times as possible in a playoff series. But for the regular season, it might actually help if your best starter breaks up your rotation so you don't have back-to-back potentially bad outings by the back end of your rotation. Now for the D-backs, it's probably a little bit different because their number 4, number 5 starter is so good. And even if those guys get hurt, if it's like Monty or Ryan Nelson as your 4 or 5 starter, like you still feel pretty quality. So the D-backs are probably not the best example for what I'm talking about, but I still think with what we've seen from the volatility of Erod last year and knowing Brandon Pfaadt hasn't taken it to the top level just yet, he hasn't popped on the biggest level just yet, I still think it would be worth experimenting with Corbin Burnes as the number 4 starter, even though it's not going to happen at all. It's just something I would want to see another team at least experiment with for a few weeks, maybe a month in the regular season. And so Corbin Burnes, he won't be going that opening series against the Chicago Cubs, but love the former AL East guy starting game number 1 against the New York Yankees. And now we'll discuss the D-backs locking down their closer of the future and Justin Martinez in segment number 3. But hey, if you're looking to place a little wagers down on a March Madness game, then the best place to do that is going to be FanDuel, because March Madness is here and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. When I see the Phoenix Suns are playing, I'll take KD over on points. I'll take Booker over on points, and then give me the opponent's money line. I'm sorry, Suns fans, but that's what you got to do if you want to win some money. If you want to win some money, up to $200 of bonus bets, just put down $5, and if your bet wins, you get all that money in your pocket. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Back here on the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, and now let's discuss the Justin Martinez extension, because the D-backs are basically telling you this is the closer of the future. This is the closer of right now. Despite the D-backs not naming a closer yet for opening day, it will be J Mart, and this deal just solidifies their belief in him. And this is a bet on J Mart, and I think it's a smart bet. We've seen a team do this before. This is not the first time a team has bought out the arbitration, a couple years of free agency for a reliever who we think can be really good, but hasn't exactly done it for a full season or hasn't had a long track record yet, because 5 years, $18 million for J Mart can be an incredible value if he produces like the guy who they are modeling this contract after, Emmanuel Clase of the Cleveland Guardians. It sounds insane to compare maybe J Mart to Clase, or maybe it doesn't, because you look at J Mart, if you've watched J Mart last year, you see his stuff, it probably isn't insane to compare him. But Clase, when he got his deal, he was basically 1 year in Major League Baseball. He had an incredible 2019 season with the Texas Rangers, 2.3 ERA, but then he missed the entire 2020 COVID-shortened season due to PEDs. And the Cleveland Guardians decided to bet on Emmanuel Clase and give him a 5-year, $20 million extension, doing the same thing, buying out like the pre-ARB, the ARB, a year free agency, like the same kind of deal that J Mart just got. And what has Clase done since getting that deal? He has been one of the best relievers we've ever seen. Essentially a 1.4 ERA the last 4 seasons. He's averaging about 44 saves a season as well. Like, he's been incredible. I don't know if J Mart's going to turn into a 1.2 ERA with 44 saves every year, but if he just what he did last year with more saves, if he's a 2.5 ERA guy and around 30 saves a season, that is definitely all the D-backs want from him. And if you also just look at the pitching arsenal, the stuff of a J Mart, you can definitely make the argument it's even better than a Clase, because Clase is filthy. Don't get me wrong. That cutter averaging around 100 miles per hour, a 150 batting average allowed on his cutter, whiff percentage around 24.5%. His slider is maybe the most deadly, 145 average allowed on that, a 161 slug, and the whiff percentage on that is 35%. His best of any pitch. His put away percentage on that is 23%, the best of any pitch. He can throw hard, but it's that secondary stuff off of what he throws hard that is really special and is what really fools opposing batters. And when you look at J Mart, it's the same kind of thing. The thing that he throws the most. Hold up. I just had J Mart's stats pulled up and I accidentally clicked off of it. But when we look at J Mart's stats, the thing he throws the most is his sinker ball, which averages 100 miles per hour. But the thing that puts away hitters the most is his split finger. 0.098 average allowed. 122 slugging allowed, and a 54% whiff percentage last year, 36.5% put away percentage. The strikeout numbers on J-Mart are so much more dominant than Emmanuel Clase. And so when you're looking at the Clase deal versus the J-Mart's deal, it's not only a better value, you can make a statistical argument looking at the advanced stats that there's even more upside here with J-Mart than what we saw with Clase. Will he realize that potential? Will he live up to the ceiling? Maybe, maybe not. But this is as smart of a bet that you can make if you're the D-backs. Having a guy that could be a flamethrower, averaging 102 on the fastball, 30 to 40 saves a season, a 1 to a 2.5 ERA. Like, this can be one of the tier 1 closers in baseball over the next 5 years. And also, he's not just going to be one of the best closers in baseball over the next 5 years. If everything goes right with Justin Martinez and he actually lives up to like 80 to 90% of what you think he can be, J-Mart will go down as the best closer in D-backs franchise history by the end of this contract. Not by the second contract, by the end of this contract. He has 9 career saves right now with the D-backs. The all-time career saves leader for Arizona is Jose Valverde, and he was incredible with Arizona. He had one monster season with 47 saves. But if you look at his totality, he only had 98 career saves with Arizona, under 100, and he's the all-time leader for the D-backs. J-Mart's already at 9. And so essentially, if he just averages 20 saves a season over the next 5 years, which I think is definitely doable for a guy of his talent, the opportunities he's going to get in the back end of the bullpen, J-Mart will finish this season, or not this season, will finish this contract as the D-backs all-time saves leader, and he will go down as the best closer in D-backs franchise history, which we love to see. And Mike Hazen continues to lock down this D-backs core, which is fantastic. You look at who's under contract for the D-backs going forward. We got Corbin Burnes. We got Erod. Gallen, Kelly, unfortunately, they're going to be free agents. Fott shouldn't be going anywhere. We got his arbitration year still under contract. Moreno, I think he's going to be the next guy. If you had to guess which D-back is going to be next to get an early contract extension, if Moreno plays really well this year offensively, he is going to get bought out as well. Moreno is going to be the next guy. But got Perdomo under contract. Like, what the D-backs are doing right now, Marte, Carroll, like, they're locking up their core pieces, especially these youngsters, getting them on insane values and deals. J-Mart, Perdomo, like, incredible stuff by the D-backs. And up next, do not be surprised when the Gabriel Moreno extension comes through at some point this year or at the end of the year, because if Moreno goes out there and bats 280, 290, adds more pop to his bat, and continues to play incredible defense, I don't see a world where the D-backs aren't starting those conversations next with Moreno. And so we love J-Mart, and I think at the end of this contract, he will be the D-backs all-time saves leader and will go down as the greatest closer in D-backs franchise history. Now that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces.